The air in these stone depths clung heavy, thick with forgotten tears and the metallic tang of despair. It was a silence so profound, so suffocating, that every breath drawn felt like a transgression against the very walls designed to swallow whispers whole. Here, beneath the polished marble and gilded ceilings of the Sultan's palace, existed another world, a world of cold, unyielding stone, where the sun was a distant memory and tomorrow was but a bleaker shadow of today. She was merely another shadow amongst them, a wisp of a girl, stripped of name and heritage, cast into the crucible of the harem's dungeons. Her fate, it seemed, was etched in the cruel indifference of history. To be a fleeting beauty, a forgotten name, another life extinguished before the dawn could break. A mere pawn in the grand, brutal chess game of a dynasty, destined for nothing more than a shallow grave and a memory that no one would bother to recall. But watch closely, my dear ladies. Look beyond the tattered rags, past the smudges of dirt and the tremor in her hands. See the eyes. Ah, the eyes. They were pools of raw despair, yes, reflecting only the crushing weight of her captivity. Yet, deep within those haunted depths, where most would see only defeat, a flicker began to stir. Not hope, no. Hope is a luxury the dungeons do not afford. This was something colder, harder. It was the glint of understanding, the dawning, terrifying clarity that innocence was a weakness, and survival the only true virtue. She was not meant for this world of elegant silks and whispered poison, of delicate betrayals concealed by smiles. She was meant to break. But the spirit, once wounded, can harden into something far more formidable than steel. In that suffocating silence, a seed was planted. A seed of ruthless will, watered by tears and nurtured by the bitter taste of utter powerlessness. She learned to listen to the silence itself, discerning the subtle shifts, the approaching footfalls, the hushed commands that sealed other fates. Every sound became a lesson, every moment a test. This was not the tale of a maiden rescued, nor of a heart blossoming in adversity. No, this was the genesis of a predator. A girl, whose bloodline was dismissed, whose future was trampled, began to understand that the game of queens was not fought with armies, but with shadows and silence, with patience and the precise application of fear. She would learn to dance on the sharpest of blades, to transform the very chains meant to bind her into tools of ascent. This, my astute observers, was the first tremulous step in a bloody game. The beginning of a legend forged not in light, but in the deepest, most unforgiving darkness. A game where the price of losing was everything. And the prize? An entire dynasty. The rough stone walls of her past, the cold, unforgiving silence of true captivity, they began to blur, receding like a forgotten nightmare. Here, now, the silence was different. It was a weighted thing, thick with unspoken words and unseen eyes, a predator's hush within gilded cages. The clinking of golden trinkets, the rustle of silk against marble, the heavy, sweet scent of jasmine and ambition, these were the new sounds, the new air she breathed. She walked these polished floors, a phantom among phantoms, her bare feet learning the subtle give of priceless carpets. Her world had transformed, not into freedom, but into a more elaborate prison, one veiled in luxury, its sharpest edges hidden beneath brocade and smiles. Every glance was a judgment, every whispered name a potential decree. And in this perilous theater, where the lives of women were but pawns in the grand design of a dynasty, she began to learn. Observe, they say, and you shall see. But she did more than merely see. Her gaze, seemingly demure, absorbed every tremor of a hand, every flicker in a courtier's eyes, every subtle shift in the balance of power that played out in hushed tones around her. She was not seeking love, no. That was a fool's game in these halls. She sought purchase, a fulcrum, an appoggio in the language of the old world, a point of leverage. Her weapon was not the blade, but the mind. Not brute force, but calculated thought. And she shielded it all behind a face that bore the fresh, untouched innocence of a girl newly arrived, a lamb led to slaughter. Who could suspect such acute perception, such ruthless calculation brewing beneath that placid surface? It was in the courtyard, where the morning sun dappled through ancient cypresses, that her first lesson in manipulation unfolded. A minor official, a man whose lineage was long but whose influence was waning, stood near the fountain. He was a creature of habit and vanity, his days filled with the petty triumphs of the less powerful, his nights haunted by the fear of obsolescence. He craved respect, perhaps even a flicker of admiration, from those around him. A weakness, then, a tiny crack in the dam of his self-importance. She moved with an almost ethereal grace, her head bowed just so. As she passed him, a wisp of embroidered silk, a headscarf of the finest azure, seemed to drift from her hair, landing softly at his feet. It was a movement so delicate, so seemingly accidental, that it drew no immediate attention from the guards or the idle servants. But it was no accident. The precise timing, the gentle curve of her hand as it had slipped from her head. It was rehearsed. She stopped, a small, almost imperceptible gasp escaping her lips, her eyes widening with a touch of feigned embarrassment. The official, startled from his reverie, bent slowly to retrieve it. Their hands brushed as he returned the fabric. A quick, shy smile from her, a glance that held just the right measure of gratitude, and something else. Something that hinted at a vulnerability he might protect, a secret understanding he might share. And in that brief, fleeting exchange, a seed was planted. A whisper of a favor, subtly implied, concerning a document, a message, a small piece of information that would serve her. He, the forgotten official, felt a surge of importance, a fleeting connection to something vibrant and young. He did not see the sharp, calculating intellect behind those grateful eyes, only the promise of a small, innocent alliance. This, my friends, was her first step. A dance on the precipice, where one wrong move could mean not just death, but utter oblivion, erased from the annals of the bloodline, swallowed by the shadows. She did not seek love, she sought leverage, and she found it, not in strength, but in the brittle weaknesses of the powerful. She learned that even a breath, a carefully placed sigh, could be a weapon. And as the sun climbed higher, warming the cold marble, she knew this game was far from over. Indeed, it had only just begun. The faint scent of poison, metaphorical and perhaps real, hung in the air. This was the true nature of the court, the silent art of survival. And she, the girl from captivity, was swiftly mastering its deadly rhythm. The air in the Sultan's chamber, usually thick with incense and the hushed promises of power, had grown taut. A silence, heavy and charged, now clung to the velvet draperies, whispering of unseen currents. You see it, don't you? The shift? The moment when a pawn, once dismissed, finds its square in the heart of the board. She had learned. Every forced smile, every murmured insult, every opulent gift from a rival had been a lesson. The harem, once a gilded cage, had become her academy. The palace, with its sprawling courtyards and labyrinthine corridors, was now her chessboard. And she? No longer a captive, no longer merely a consort. She was the queen, poised, her gaze sweeping over the pieces, calculating their every move. This was the game of queens, played not with steel, but with silk and whispers. The stakes? Not merely her own fragile life, but the very bloodline of the Osmanlis, the destiny of a formidable dynasty. Each sunrise brought a new battle, fought in the shadowed corners of courtiers' minds, in the trembling hands of a scribe, in the very scent of the sherbet offered in gilded cups. Poison, you ask? Oh, it was everywhere. Not always in the lethal draught, but in the insidious seed of doubt planted, the carefully crafted rumor, the suggestion whispered close enough to the Sultan's ear to become his own thought. She had seen it delivered with a smile, tasted in the false sweetness of a rival's flattery. Betrayal was the currency, and she had become its master banker. Remember the princess, the one who spoke too freely of her lineage, too loudly of her ambitions? Her fate was sealed not by a blade, but by a single intercepted letter. A broken seal, found not by chance, but by design. A message ostensibly innocent, but containing a coded plea to a distant court. A plea for influence, for power separate from the Sultan's will. Such an act, once exposed, could unravel years of careful alliances, shatter a reputation beyond repair. The whisper, almost imperceptible, that reached the Grand Vizier's ear was hers. It was enough to collapse a long-standing alliance, to turn a trusted confidant into a pariah. She moved through the palace like a ghost, yet her presence was undeniable. Her luxurious gowns, shimmering with gold thread and precious gems, were not merely adornments. They were a shield, a distraction, concealing an iron will forged in the fires of adversity. Beneath the delicate layers of silk, a mind sharper than any dagger worked relentlessly. Every ambition of her rivals, every weakness of a susceptible pasha, every forgotten slight in the Sultan's memory, she catalogued them. She learned to pull at these threads, one by one, until the tapestry of power began to unravel for those who opposed her. Her decisions were not born of passion, but of cold, precise logic. Each move was calculated with the chilling efficiency of an executioner's blade. To falter was to die. To hesitate was to be swept away. She understood that power here was never given. It was seized, clawed away from those who clung to it, often with their dying breath. This was the culmination of her ascent, a brutal ballet of strategy and survival. The girl they had once mocked as a mere plaything, a fleeting distraction, was now the architect of her own legend. And the sound you hear? It is the distant echo of an empire bending to her will. She stood, atop the precipice. The world, once a prison, now a footstool. Did you feel it then? The chill that crept not from the polished marble beneath her slippers, but from the very air she breathed at that dizzying height. She was alone, utterly. The throne was hers, every intricate carving, every gem embedded in its gold, a testament to a will unbending. But look closer. Was it truly a throne she ascended, or a gilded cage, built by her own hands, brick by bloody brick? The price of such greatness was not merely wealth, nor even the lives of her enemies. It was herself. Each victory, yes, it was heralded with trumpets and the rustle of the finest silks, with bowed heads and whispered praises. Yet each victory also left a scar, a gouge in the very fabric of her soul. A part of her irrevocably lost to the shadows from which she had clawed her way to this impossible peak. The dynasty was secured, her bloodline, now etched in the annals of time, paid for in coin far more precious than gold. The innocent, the treacherous, the merely inconvenient, all swept aside. This was not a saga of good versus evil, my dear viewers, but of survival. Ruthless, unyielding. A woman who had learned the hard truth. To become a goddess, one must first be willing to shed the last vestiges of humanity. Observe the chamber, the opulent tapestries, the scent of rosewater and ambition. A cup of sherbet, sparkling ruby red, rests upon the inlaid table. Sweet, yes, but bitter too. For even at this pinnacle, with an empire at her command, the whisper of poison is never far from her ears. The hand that pours the drink could be the same that signs her death warrant. Who could she trust? Her own shadow, perhaps. For every face that smiled, a dagger lurked. Every loyal vow, a potential betrayal. She was surrounded by nothing but mirrors and shadows, reflecting 1,000 versions of her own ambition. The silence in these halls, once a comfort, now held the weight of untold conspiracies. This was her new reality, a magnificent prison, a solitary reign. The blood on her hands? not a stain, but the indelible ink of a new beginning. The seal of her dynasty, forged in fire and tears, sustained by constant vigilance. Look closely, my friends, beyond the gilded cages and the whispered plots. Her story, it was not merely a chapter scribed into the dusty annals, but an epic, a seismic shift in the very bedrock of power. From the depths of captivity, a mere shadow in the Sultan's vast palace, she ascended. Not simply survived, mind you, but forged her own destiny with a will as cold and unyielding as winter steel. She rose from the anonymous darkness to become a radiant goddess, a name that would echo through generations, inspiring both awe and a primal, visceral dread. Her blood, they say, flowed through the veins of kings and sultans for centuries to come, a silent, potent current shaping the very dynasty. Every decision she made, every whispered word veiled in silk, every calculated silence became a brick in the foundation of an empire. This was no fleeting triumph of a woman's beauty or charm. It was a brutal, undeniable testament, a proof whispered across the marble halls that in the cruelest of games, the lethal game of queens, ultimate power belongs not to brute force or inherited might, but to an unwavering intellect and a truly ruthless, unburdened will. Her path was a lesson etched in invisible ink, a chilling truth for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. To become a goddess, to stand so far above the common fray, sometimes one must first become the devil. She understood the true nature of the palace, where poison was not always a draft, but a rumor, a glance, a carefully placed absence. Her name now lies engraved upon the stones of eternity, a legend whispered when the winds shift. And even now, her shadow still looms, long and formidable, over every ambitious soul who dares to step onto that blood-soaked stage. Remember this, my dear ones. The greatest legends are not born in thunderous declarations, but often from the deepest, most profound silence.